All right, so we'll say good morning. Let's begin. We have a beautiful daf today ahead of us. Today's daf is Nun Tes 59. We are picking up on Nun Ches Amud Beis. Remember again, we were discussing the idea ultimately of Hamal ben Pnei Chaveiro B'Rabin. So the idea, the incredible intensity and negativity ultimately of going ahead and embarrassing someone in public. So our shir this morning is sponsored by Shmuel and Devorah Miller in honor of the engagement of their daughter Tehila to Nathaniel Greenwald. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. And in honor of the 80th birthday of Shmuel's father, Mr. Henry Miller Chaim Leib Yitzchak Ben Moshe. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Chassan and Kala Shabizocha to build a Bayis Mem and Yisrael B'Shat Tova U'Mitzlachos, and the Zayda Shalem Yars Hashem Bizocha to many years of Nachas from his beautiful Mishpacha. Amen. So let's begin. So we are picking up with let's begin Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman. So Nun Chesam at base 58b 2, 4, 6, 8, 7 lines up from the bottom. So Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Kalamal b'pnei chaveiro b'Rabim kilu shofech damim. Both an incredible yisod. Whoever goes ahead and embarrasses his friend in public, it's as if he's shedding blood. Amarlei Shapir Kamras, he said, you're saying good. Because you see that when you embarrass someone, the color drains from their face, and literally their face becomes white. So we'll say, just take something interesting, by the way. The Ben Yehoyada raises an interesting kasha on this. I'm not going to keep you here till 10 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to worry. Unless you want to. If you're up for it, I'm up for it. But I'll tell you just a few little ha'aras as we go along. So the Ben Yehoyada asks a very interesting question on this. He says, all of us are familiar with this expression. Whoever you go, if you embarrass someone in public, it's as if you spill their blood. So the Ben Yehoyada asks a simple question. Kasha, kevan da'amar lechavero lashon yachid, havele lememar kilu shofech damo lashon yachid. So the Mal says something I was embarrassed when I saw this because I've seen this Gemara, I've also seen this Gemara multiple times. Why didn't this kasha ever dawn on me? So the Ben Yehoyada says the way this should read is Hamal ben Pnei Chaveiro B'Rabim. Someone embarrasses his friend, singular. Ki'ilu shofech damo. It's as if you spill his blood, singular. But instead it doesn't say that. It says kilu shofech damim, plural. So it says the Ben Yehoyada something amazing. Get ready for this. When you embarrass your friend, you kill him a number of times. Because when you humiliate someone, even after the act is done, every single time they remember that event, they're embarrassed. Every single time they remember that event, even though the embarrasser, the perpetrator, is not there, every single time they're present, ultimately he's reminded, similarly, every single time I see the people in front of whom I was embarrassed, I remember that event and I replay it in my mind. Rabbi say it's an incredible yisod. And therefore, Rabbi say it turns out, and this is such an incredible yisod. In general, when we hurt people, so again, when I go ahead and I apologize, I think, case closed, situation over. But for the person who's been hurt, I will say, the trauma that causes an individual and the way they play over that trauma in their mind over and over and over again and have to relive it over and over and over again, it's not a one-time kilu shofech damo, it's kilu shofech damim. That ultimately that person experiences that pain multiple times, sometimes throughout their life. An incredible yisod. So the Gemara goes weiter. Everybody, now we'll say the way this reads is, everyone goes to Gehenna except for 4 people. So the Gemara says, whoa, everybody goes to Gehenna except for 3 people? Rather, says the Gemara, no. We'll say rather what it means to say is, everybody who goes down, all of those who go to Gehenna come out, right, Olin, except for 3 that go in but don't come out. Now, we'll say, just so you understand the word about Gehenna. A little word about Gehenna. So again, we don't believe, the concept of hell or purgatory, those are Christian concepts. We do not believe in that. Our concept of Gehenna, whatever it is a purging process. The idea is the neshama undergoes this process with the goal ultimately to rid the neshama of whatever impurities, of whatever spiritual uncleanliness, to be able ultimately again to ascend to the Ola Lashem, to be Ola Gan Eden. So the idea over here is that even those who go to Gehenna go and come out, with the exception apparently of three. The Elohim, Abosa, here are the three. Habal Ishesish, someone who commits an act of adultery, and one who embarrasses his friend in public, and someone who goes ahead and calls his friend, literally, means somebody who calls his friend by a nickname, by a negative nickname. So, but I don't understand the notion of going ahead and calling your friend by a nickname, right? Isn't that the same thing as embarrassing your friend? To which the Gemara says, thank you. To which the Gemara says, no. Well, say the chap with the nickname is, you could have someone who's known by a negative nickname, and what? That person is used to it. And it could be that it doesn't even bother the person anymore. But what? But lamaisa, you still can't call the person. Well, so that is halacha lamaisa. Can't call people by nicknames, even if, again, lamaisa, the person says it's okay, or doesn't mind it, or they've been called this since the time that they're 5. You can't call people nicknames that are potentially disparaging in any way. We'll say, just so you understand, what's the common denominator amongst those three things? That ultimately one who goes ahead and commits adultery, one who embarrasses someone, and someone who calls someone by a nickname. We'll say, these are all things, especially with the Ben Yoda said, these are all things that leave their mark on people for the rest of their lives. So ultimately an act of adultery is committed, even if a couple is able to repair their relationship, it's never the same. Once you embarrass that person, like we saw the Ben Yoda, potentially that embarrassment, that shame, that humiliation remains there for the rest of their life. Calling someone a nickname, we'll say, a name captures your essence. When you call someone by a nickname, what you're damaging is their very essence, their very identity. And even if a person says, mochel, it's okay, no one's really mochel on their kavod at the end of the day. All of us want our kavod to remain intact. All of us want our dignity to remain intact. So these three things are things that mamish detract from a person's ability to live in a normal sense every single day. You take away from someone's ability to live in a normal sense every single day. Unfortunately, such a person like that goes to Gehenna and doesn't come out. I will say, by the way, but, what's the but? The but is, I'm going to tell you something. I should shut off the recording for a moment, right? Whenever you see a Gemara that says that you go to Gehenna and you don't come out, my advice to you is, ignore it. What do I mean by that? Ein davar omed b'fnei tshuva. No matter what you have or you haven't done in life, there's always tshuva. And tshuva defies everything, including Gemaras. And tshuva defies everything, including Ma'amari Chazal. This is like the famous Yisod, where Acher wants to do tshuva. Rabbi Meir says, Acher do tshuva, and Rabbi, what does Rabbi Meir say? You see, what does Acher say? Acher says, I can't. Because Shamati mi achori hapargud, I heard literally a Baskol comes out and says, Shuvu banim shovevim chutz mi Acher. Right, the Moshe says every single day, return everyone except Acher. So asks the Maharsha, how could Acher be held responsible for not doing tshuva? If the Ribono Shel Olam Bichvodo Ba'atzmo every single day is saying, everybody come back, except you. Except Acher. God is saying, Acher, I reject you. So says the Maharsha, how could Acher be held responsible for not doing tshuva? And what's the answer? And if I would say it, you would say it's Apikoros, but it's the Maharsha. What does the Maharsha say? The Maharsha says, Acher, who cares what a Baskol says? Who cares what the voice says? You do what you have to do, and everything else will fall into place. The Maharsha says, Acher, ignore the Baskol. You know what that means? Ignore the Ribono Shalom. Don't worry about Chutz Mi Acher. You do what you have to do. So I'll say, these Gemaras also, okay, there are three people that go together and don't come out. My advice is, if Chas V'Shalom, a person falls into one of these categories, ignore it. Ignore it. Do tshuva. Do what you have to do. Turn yourself around. Turn life around. Be a better person. And you know what? Some way, somehow, the pieces will fall into place. So the Gemara goes, oh, now we got to Nun Tes. Good. So top of Nun Tes with Aleph. Right? This is today's daf. So Noach lo li adam shi'ah. So it's exciting. Baruch Hashem. It's good. Noach lo sha'ad. Not the Gehenna part's not exciting. I'm saying this is exciting. Noach lo la'adam sheva safek eshes ish. Rabbi says this is another amazing Gemara. It is better for a man to have relations with a woman who is a safek eshes ish, who is safek. It's possible that she's married. Va'al yabim pnei chaveiro birabim, rather to embarrass his friend in public. Now, Rabbi say, now I want to be clear. The Gemara clearly is not, because I see like a lot of piqued curiosity over here. So remember again, both are bad. Both are bad. But the idea of the Gemara is, you're going to see why the Gemara is, because this is such a strange expression, you're going to see why the Gemara is dafka using this example. The Gemara is trying to highlight the obvious severity of humiliating someone. So the Gemara says in the hierarchy of sins, it is better to go ahead, meaning it's worse to embarrass someone than it is to have relations with a safek eshes ish. So what do we get? This from Midrash Rava. This is a heartbreaking Gemara. To Darish Rava, my dichsev, what's the meaning of the pasuk that says, Ubitzali, the Gemara over here is quoting from the pasuk from Tilim, David HaMelech. Ubitzali samchu v'ne'esafu. Ne'esfu alai nechem v'lo yadati karu v'lo damu. So both say, listen to this. So the pasuk over here literally means, when I limped, my enemies were happy. V'ne'esafu karu v'lo damu. And ultimately my flesh was torn and it did not bleed. So both say, this is David HaMelech speaking. What is David HaMelech speaking about? Both say, listen to this. Amar David HaMelech Baruch Hu, Yibon Sha'olam. You know, She'im hayu mekarim bisari lo hayu dami shoses la'aretz. Ribon, you know that if somebody were to cut me, I would not bleed. I'm both saying, what does that mean? David HaMelech saying, if someone were to cut me, I would not bleed. It means, you know, I have been so badly humiliated throughout my life that literally, again, there's no blood left in my flesh. There's no blood in my flesh. He says, why? So again, just so you understand the backdrop of this. The backdrop to this episode, ultimately, again, is the episode of David and Bathsheba. So remember, again, David HaMelech is on his rooftop, and he sees a woman bathing on her rooftop, Bathsheba. He desires her, he sends for her, he spends the night with her. She is the wife of Uriah Hitti. David HaMelech then goes ahead and orchestrates for Uriah, who was one of his soldiers, to be sent out to the front and is killed. Bathsheba is pregnant from that night with David. That baby dies as a result of the mistake of David HaMelech. And David HaMelech is given a series of 3 different punishments for this particular act: the loss of the baby, illness, and the rebellion of Avshalom. All of that comes from this act. Now, Tosas goes into this whole arichos, but you understand that on a technical level, David HaMelech did not commit an act of adultery. Why did David not commit an act of adultery? Because one of the interesting institutions that David HaMelech instituted for his army before this episode was that every single soldier would give his wife a conditional get upon going out to war. They did this in order to avoid any type of aguna actions. And essentially what the get would say, be with it tonight with a condition: if I don't return by so-and-so date, this get is retroactively chal from the moment that I gave it to you. So therefore, should any soldier chas v'shalom go missing in action, the wife would not be in aguna. So on a technical level, after Uriah Hitti is died, granted he dies because David HaMelech positions him purposely on the front line so he would be killed. Technically, his death retroactively triggers the get, which means on a technical level, the night that David was with Bathsheba, she was already a divorced woman. So on a technical level, there was no act of adultery, but clearly David HaMelech is taken to task for behavior unbefitting of the king. And he's taken to task by the Navi for that, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that. But for the rest of David HaMelech's life, for the rest of his life, he was humiliated by his peers and by others for this act. You know, in the Navi we read it and we go on, and we don't see any more mention about it. But for the rest of David HaMelech's life, he is humiliated about it. Look what he says: David HaMelech says, Chash Baruch, when I walk into the base medrash, and they're studying the section of Negam and Olos, we'll say the laws of Saras and the laws of Tumah. Omrim li, David, Habo ishes ish misaso b'mai. So I'll say, so listen to this. I walk into the base medrash, and they're learning the sugyas of Olim and Negam, right? Olos and Negam, the laws of ritual purity and impurity. Nothing to do with adultery. And what happens? I walk into the base medrash, and what do they say? They stop everything and say, oh, by the way, David, what's the halacha of a man who commits adultery? In other words, what are they doing? They're taunting him. They're taunting him. And what does David HaMelech say? V'ani omer lahem, you know what? Misaso b'chenek. Yeah, the laws of adultery are very severe. You get put to death by beis din, by strangulation. V'yesh lo chelik le'olam haba. But you know what the amazing part is? Even if a man commits adultery and he's killed by beis din, he has a chelik in olam haba. Aval amalbin pnei chaveiro b'rabim ein lo chelik in olam haba. The Torah says, I say to my taunters, you know what? maybe I am an adulterer, and maybe I do deserve to be put to death, but one thing is clear, which is if I am executed by a Beis Din, I know I'm going to Olam Haba. But you guys, you know what the din of Mal B'nei Chavero B'Rabim, embarrassing someone, humiliating someone in public, that is deserving of death, and Ein Lo Chelik L'Olam Haba. V'Amar Mar Zutra Bar Tovia, Amar Rav, Amar Lei, Amar Rav Zada Bar Bizna. So we'll say, so again, just to understand the play on words, Rashi points out, Ubit Sal'i Samchu. Rashi points out, so Tzali we translated ultimately as limping. Rashi also points out, it's a little bit on play on words, Tsela also means what? Rib. Means a rib. Chava, right? Chava is created from the rib of Adam. So ultimately, again, it's a play on words, but Sali Samchu, they rejoice over my downfall with the Tsela, with the rib, with my wife, now his wife, with Batsheva. Va'amri leis, the Gemara goes weiter. Va'amri le Amar Rav Chana bar Bizna, Amar Rav Shimon Chasid, Va'amri le Amar Rav Yochanan Mishram Rashbi, Noach lo li Adam sheyapa atzol lekiv shanaish, v'yal yalbim p'nei chaver b'ravim. We'll say a wild Gemara. It is better for someone to go ahead and allow themselves to be cast into a fiery furnace, i.e. to be killed, rather than to go ahead and humiliate someone. So the Gemara says, where do we know this? From Tamar. We know this from the episode of Tamar. Dichsev himutzeis v'hishalcha al chameha. So let's remember again, Tamar is pregnant by Yehuda. Of course, no one knows that she's pregnant by Yehuda because she had dressed up as a harlot. So what happens? She's being led out to be executed, and she is ready to go to her death without divulging the identity of the father. She sends back, remember Yehuda's cloak and his signet ring, and she says, the father of my child is the owner of these items. And she leaves it to Yehuda. If you want to own this, then you could own it. If you don't want to own it, I am not going to embarrass you in public. Shabbos says, so in fact, again, the Gemara says, you see from here, better to be cast into a fiery furnace, to die, and to not embarrass someone. I will say, just so you should know, there's an interesting discussion here. So how do you understand a statement like this? Meaning, does this literally mean a person has to give their life rather than embarrass someone else? Well, we know there are three things you have to give your life for, right? Rather than worship idolatry, avodah zarah, shvichos damim, killing someone, and gilarayos, immorality. Those are the three things. Ma'al p'nei chaveiro is not one of them. So what's that? Tell you something amazing. So the Rabbeinu Yonah Maseches Bracha says that ma'al p'nei chaveiro is what? It's an offshoot of shvichos damim. And the Rabbeinu Yonah actually says, we'll say this is wild, absolutely wild. We don't pass it in this way, but the Rabbeinu Yonah actually says that he holds that mal b'nei chaver, embarrassing someone, is an offshoot of shvichos damim, and in fact, the Gemara is saying that habanas b'nei chaver, embarrassing someone, is yehareg va'al yavar. That literally, again, it's one of the things you have to give your life rather than do is embarrassing someone publicly. That's the Rabbeinu Yonah's position. That's Rabbeinu Yonah's position. We do not accept that halacha l'maisa. As I said to you, maybe it was yesterday, a few days ago, sometimes you learn a lot even from those shitos that are not accepted halacha l'maisa. Right? Sometimes the fact that the Rabbeinu Yonah could say such a thing like that. So, okay, it's not Yihareg Val Yavar, but the fact that someone says it is Yihareg Val Yavar tells you the incredible importance that we have to place on how we treat others. So the Gemara goes weiter. What does it mean when it says you should not wrong? One man should not wrong amiso. What does amiso mean? Rabbi say it means that the prohibition of ona'as devarim, of afflicting someone with your words, doesn't apply just to anyone. Rather, it's am she'itcha b'torah mitzvos, to fellow Jews who are with you in Torah and mitzvos. Fellow Jews who are with you in Torah and mitzvos. So it's on a technical level, the technical law of ona'as devarim ultimately, again, will only apply to those who identify with you in Torah mitzvos. So we'll say, again, one should be careful how they apply this, because l'maisa, again, there are many Jews today, contemporarily, who are not with us in Torah and mitzvos, but lav davka because they've made an informed decision not to be with us in Torah and mitzvos. Sometimes, again, that's the way they raise, and that's the understanding they have. So again, klal gadol is always good to err on the side of caution, and be careful with ona'as devarim with any Jew. Whether they're itcha b'torah mitzvos, not itcha b'torah mitzvos, be careful how you treat all Jews. Amarav, this is amazing. This is mamish amazing, and it's really, you're going to see it's hashgacha pratis that we're learning this Gemara on for what to many is a day off, on a day when a person's going to have a lot of interaction with their mishpacha. So here, you're going to thank me. You're going to thank me for this. So says the Gemara, listen to this. Amarav, li'olam yehe adam zar ba'onas ishto. But a person should be very careful. Onas ishto means with mistreating his wife. A person should be very careful, literally, how he talks to his wife, and never to chas shalom say insensitive things. Why? Boss is amazing. Shemitoch shedim asa mitsuya, ono asa krova. Because since women cry more easily, therefore it is easier to offend them. Now here, by the way, you understand what the Gemara is teaching us. This is an incredible yisod. Sometimes a husband will say something, and his wife will be hurt. And what will the husband say? What will the husband say? Right, what's the number one thing not to say? That too often we say. What's the big deal? Yeah, no, never say that. Never say that. No, right? You're being too sensitive. Right? You're being too sensitive. It is quite possible that sometimes a wife is being too sensitive. And you know what Chazal say? Deal with it. Deal with it. So if your wife is sensitive, okay. So here's the incredible yisod. You see, sometimes we come at this in an arrogant way and we say, you're being too sensitive, you need to lessen your sensitivity. To which Chazal are saying, no. The job of the husband is to deepen his sensitivity. The obligation of the wife is not to develop a thicker skin. The obligation is on the husband to be more sensitive to his wife's sensitivities. It's an incredible yisod. And says the Gemara, you know that a woman will cry more easily. And therefore, man, be careful what you say, how you say it, and when you say it. The onus of Osai is on us. The responsibility is on us. The responsibility is to make sure that we cater to the sensitivities of our wives. Incredible yisod. Rabbi Elazar says from the day that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so the gates of Tefillah are closed. Shene Emar, because the pasuk says, Gam ki ezach vishavea sasam tefillah si. Literally, the pasuk says, even though I cry out and I supplicate, sasam tefillah si means my tefillah has been uninterrupted. Va'afa pi sheshare tefillah ninalu. And both say, even though the gates of tefillah have been closed, share dima'os lo ninalu. The gates of tears have not been closed. It was a very moving Gemara. Shene Amar, Shama tefillah si Hashem v'shavasi azina al tima si al techarash. Do not be silent unto my tears. So we'll say, so the yisod ultimately being, the Ribono Shel Olam has a special sensitivity towards tears. So because a man knows that ultimately, again, his wife is going to go ahead and is more prone to crying, a man has to be careful with how he talks and how he treats his wife. This is another interesting Gemara. Whoever follows the advice of his wife, nofel b'gehenom. Right? So, don't leave yet. Let me just, right? So whoever follows the advice of his wife, ultimately, the Lashon of here, falls in Gehenna is an interesting Lashon as well, which literally means, again, it's not a good idea. Shene Emar, Verak lo haya ke'achav. So we'll say, interesting enough, where does the Gemara get this from? So we'll say, so we know, again, one of the evil kings of Malchus Yisrael was a man by the name of Achav. But it's clear that the Navi attributes much of his downfall to his wife, Izebel. We see this even because Achav himself, when he's separate from his wife, has these moments of clarity where it looks like he's capable of doing tshuva, but then every single time his wife exerts her negative influence over him, and he's pulled back into a web of negativity. So therefore Rav says, any man who follows the advice of his wife, no fel begehenna. Armali Rav Papa Abaye, 1 second, but is that true? But it's actually a very beautiful Gemara. V'ha amri inish, but yet people say, Isascha gutza, gachin v'til chosha. Well, I say this is a beautiful, beautiful yisod. What does it mean? Literally, if your wife is short, bend down to speak with her. What does it mean if your wife is short, bend down to speak with her? So I'll say, so first of all, it fits into what we were saying before, that it is a husband's obligation to mold himself to his wife, not a wife's obligation to mold herself to her husband. An incredible, incredible yisod. I'll say this, I'll just say this because we're amongst friends and whatever, the thousands of people listen to the download, but whatever it is. But anyway, it's good. It's good. I was like, you understand, 85% of the responsibility for Shalom Bayis is on a husband's shoulders. 85%. It might even be closer to 90. The lion's share of responsibility for what happens in your home, what happens in your marriage, is a man's responsibility. It is my obligation to adapt to my wife. It is my obligation to be sensitive to my wife's sensitivities. It is my obligation to know what is going to make her happy, what is going to make her upset, and even though sometimes it might be even a shtickle unreasonable, or maybe a shtickle unfair, that doesn't make a difference. The responsibility for Shalom Bayis rests primarily on the shoulders of the husband. And that's what Chazal is saying. If your wife is short, you bend down to her. Right? It's not the pshat that she should get a step stool and come up to you. If she's short, you bend down and whisper to her. Now, the context in which they're using it over here is bend down to her and whisper. Don't. Did I say something upsetting? Right? So what happens? So again, the issue over here is what it was. What I'm sorry. I'm Mavayishim Baragim. I ask your Mechila. So the idea we'll say over here is in this context, what they're using it for is that consult with your wife. So they're meaning again, they see a contradiction. You just said before, whoever takes advice from his wife goes to Gehenna, but yet here Chazal is saying, take advice from your wife. To which the Gemara says, "Lo kasha, habamili da'alma, habamili debesa." It depends. Perhaps in worldly matters, so we'll say the way that Ben Yehoyada understands this Gemara is the following: in worldly matters, a man need not consult his wife. In other words, in worldly matters, I don't have to consult my wife. It might be a good idea to consult, but I don't have to. In matters of the home, I absolutely have to consult my wife. Another possibility is it could be that again in spiritual matters. It could be in spiritual matters I don't have to consult my wife, but in general matters I should consult my wife. So we'll say the way the bottom line Gemara is so two different versions. We'll say so the Ben Yehoyada is telling us he points out, he says it could be that it's a good idea to always consult one's wife. But there are certain areas where one must consult one's wife, see either according to the first approach in matters of the home, or in second approach in general matters. And there might be certain matters where I don't have to consult my wife, either according to the first approach in worldly matters, or in second approach in spiritual matters. But either way, it says the Ben Yehoyada, based on this Gemara, is that if a man perceives that his wife definitely has some level of wisdom, there are some areas where I have to consult my wife, and some areas where it might just be a good idea to consult my wife. But say all of the gates of Shemayim are closed except for the gates of Ona'ah. The gates on about saying the gates where I wrong someone. But it's actually we quoted this pasuk in Maseches Ksuvos. So literally it says Rebbe Shalom is sitting on the wall. Anach means a plumb line. Right, the plumb line, meaning that line that ultimately ensures that something is directly straight. But say furthermore, God exacts punishments for everything through a shaliach, through an intermediary, except for onah, except for when we wrong one another. In that context, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and exacts punishment himself. Shena Amar ubiyado anach. The Moshe holds the plumb line. So the plumb line represents again midas hadin, strict justice. Amar Rabbi Avo, Gimel eina pargod nin al bifnehem. But say there are three things, literally translated, for which the curtain does not close in front of them. Rashi says over here, pargod is mechitza shebein shchina l'tzva marom. That's the curtain between the Ribono Shel Olam, ultimately again, and the celestial sphere. Einon Hinol, or the celestial host. Einon Hinol, Rashi says, lahafsid ra'ayasa min ha'makom, ri'yasa min ha'makom, ela tamid ra osam ha'shifra. So we'll say there are three infractions for which HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not take his almost sight off these individuals until he goes ahead and exacts punishment. One of these three, ona'ah, if someone verbally wrongs another, gezel, theft, and avodah zarah, idolatry. Ona'ah dichsiv ubiyada anach. So most about ona'ah, it says he holds the plumb line, meaning Kadosh Baruch Hu exacts punishment for ona'ah. Gezel, theft, dichsiv chamas v'shud yishma ba apanai tamid. Avodah zarah dichsiv ha'am hamachisim osim apanai tamid. Fine. So most so these are three sins for which Kadosh Baruch Hu does not take his sights off the individual until punishment is exacted. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Li'olam yehe adam zahir b'tva b'sabayis. What's an incredible yisod? A person should always make sure to have wheat in his house. Why? She'ein mariva mitzvah b'soch beiso el shal adam ela al iskei tvua. Because I will say most times that couples fight, they fight over tvua. I'll say, what does this say? Incredible yisod, money. So an incredible cause of friction within a home, an incredible cause of shalom, of a lack of shalom bayis is parnasa. To which again, so we'll say, see what's happening over here? Again, like I told you before, where Chazal are placing the lion's share of responsibility for shalom bayis upon the shoulders of the man. And they're saying you need to make parnasa, because understand, if you don't make parnasa, it is going to spill. If there's a problem with parnasa, it's going to spill over into the shalom bayis of your home. Shena Amar Hasam Gvulech Shalom Chelev Chitim Yasbiech Amar Papa Darmi Inshi. This is what people say. Kimashalim Sari Mikada. Nokish va'asi tigra besa. There's people often say when there's no wheat in the basket, the basket will make noise, and the sounds of quarrel will come from the home. What does that mean? Essentially, when the basket of the grain is empty, so if you put something in an empty receptacle and makes noise, from the moment that you hear the noise of the emptiness of the receptacle, just know that what? The sounds of discord are sure to follow. Incredible Yisrael. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa. But a person should always make sure to have food in his home. Because Klal Yisrael were only called destitute because of a lack of food in there, because of a lack of wheat. So the Gemara is just saying a yisod that ultimately, even if a person doesn't have money, a person should try to whatever degree to always have some food in their house. Because the only time a person is called dal, impoverished, is mamish when there is no food. Again, we're back to the covet of one's wife. This is incredible. Person should always be careful. Person should always be careful with the covet, with the honor of his wife, Why? She'ein bracha metzia b'soch beisal shel adam ela b'shvil ishto. This is incredible. Because all of the bracha you have in your home is only because of your wife. Shene'emar uli Avraham hetiv ba'avura. Because the pasuk says that Avram benefited because of Sarah. Now, obviously, this is talking about in Mitzrayim, but the Gemara is understanding as a yisod. Avram Avinu's bounty in life came from his wife. And this is what Rav used to say to the people of Mechuzah. Okiru l'nashaychu. Take good care of your wives, in order that you will become wealthy. So whether he meant physical wealth or emotional wealth, right? Whatever it is, the idea is incredible. Yisrael tells you all of these gemaras are to sensitize us to literally how we are supposed to treat our wife. No person is perfect, no spouse is perfect, but again, it can't say enough the responsibility that a husband has to put his wife on a pedestal. This is not a Shalom Bayis class, but if it was, what I would tell you is the following. The most important ikar in Shalom Bayis is that a man puts his wife on a pedestal. Is that a man makes his wife feel like she is the center of the universe. It really, at the end of the day, doesn't matter what you buy on an anniversary or birthday. Don't forget those dates and make sure to get something on those dates. But what's so much more important is the day-to-day. Does a wife feel like she is the center of her husband's universe? Does she feel that he would drop anything and everything if she needed something? Does she know that she could count on him no matter what? Does she know that she's the most important fixture in his life? If a wife knows that, we'll say that is 85% of Shalom Bayis. That feeling that I'm the center. And that's what Bichal was saying. Person has to understand all bracha in one's life, all bracha in one's home comes from his wife. The Gemara goes weiter. Taran Hasam. Now we're going to come. I'm telling you, it's hard to believe that all of this is on one blot of Gemara. It's like we literally won, the Babylonian Talmud lottery today. Incredible. So it says the Gemara. Taran Hasam. Also listen to this Maisa. Chatcha chulios v'nasan b'chol. Ben chulia l'chulia. Rabbi Lazar metar v'cham. So listen to this. We're going to get to the famous Maisa. The Gemara begins with a halachic shayla. If you have an oven that was made out of, if you could imagine, earthenware rings, and those earthenware rings were attached ultimately by sand, by concrete made from sand. So without getting into all the technicalities now, the shayla is, does this have the status of an earthenware item or not? So that's the difference. The difference is, under normal circumstances, a classic earthenware item, you put the earthenware item in the oven and you harden it by putting in the oven. In this case, you're taking the earthenware rings, you're attaching them with sand, hardening them in hardened sand, without putting it back into the oven. So the shayla is, does this have a status of an earthenware vessel or not? If you look at Rashi says over Chatcho chulios, Tanra asui chulios mitzarfa bekivshan kederech klei cheres, v'achar kach tziev chulios v'nasan chol ben chulia l'chulia. The difference in this oven as opposed to a classic earthenware oven is that this was not put back in the oven to harden it for its final completion. So the shayla is, does this have a status of an earthenware vessel or not? So Rabbi Lazar says, no, this is not called the kli cheres. This is not called an earthenware vessel. And the Chachamim say, yes, it is. So Amud Bezer Bosai, Bezeu Tanur Shalach Noi. Says the Gemara, this ultimately is the famous episode of Tanur Shalach Noi. My Achnoi, Rabbi say, what does Achnoi mean? What does achnoi mean? So we'll say again, because achnoi we'll say literally means a serpent, a large snake. What happens? That the arguments became coiled around this kli, just like a serpent coils itself around an object. So they encircled this oven with arguments, and they v'timu. And remember again, both say. So Rabbi Elazar says that it's tahar, it's not receptive to tumah, or it can be made tahar. And the Chum say no, it has the din of a kli cheres. So the Gemara is listening to this. Tana ba'al sayom hey Rabbi Elazar kol tshuva sheba olam v'lo kiblu. So we'll say this is the famous machlokes taner shalach noi. So we'll say so. What happens on that day? Rabbi Elazar is going ahead. Rabbi Eliezer, is going ahead. And, by the way, this is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Just so you understand. Remember again, you know who's Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus? He's one of the 5 primary disciples of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So just so you understand, like this man is one of the Gedolei Hadar. So what happens? So Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is advancing all of the different arguments to say that this should be tahar. But they did not receive it from him. Amar lahem, Chaim, can you just text Mel and just tell him I'm going to be a few minutes late coming there? Thank you. So the Gemara says the following: Amar lahem, im halacha kimosi charuv ze yochiach. So we'll say, so what happens? So Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus says, if the halacha is like me, the carob tree should prove my point. We'll say, remember this maisa, right? Remember this maisa. So the Gemara says, charuv ze yochiach. So ne'akar charuv mimkomo mea ama. Can you imagine this scene? So the carob tree uproots itself in what? And walks 100 amas. Others say it was 400 amas. Others say, I don't know about you. If you see a walking carob, whether it's 100 amas, 400 amas, so it doesn't make any difference. The point is, the carob got up and walked. So the Gemara says, so Rabbi Elazar says, this is right that I'm right. Amrulo, ein mevi'in rayim in achara. They said, shkoyach, incredible. We don't bring halachic proofs from walking carob trees. Amrulahem. And he says, if the halacha is like me, let the stream of water prove it. What happened? So we'll say, what happened? The stream reversed course. Amrulo, ein mevi'in raya me'amas hamayim. And they said to him, shkoyach, very impressive, we don't bring halachic proofs from streams of water. So they said, if the halacha is like me, the walls of the Beis Medrash should prove my point. So hitu kosei Beis Hamedrash lipo. Both say, so the walls of the Beis Hamedrash were about to fall upon everyone. Gar b'am Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua began to yell at the walls. He says, Amar lahem, in tamidei chachamim minatzchem zeh zeh b'halacha atem ativchem. Rabbi Yeshua says, this is not your business, walls of the Beis Medrash. If tamidei chachamim are arguing Torah, what does this have to do with you? Lo naflu mipnei Rabbi Kvodosh Rabbi Yeshua, but lo zak mipnei Kvodosh Rabbi Elazar. Supposed to listen to this. So the walls would not fall because of the covet of Rabbi Yeshua, but they also did not straighten back up out of covet Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus. V'adayin matin va'omdin. And I will say, to this very day, the Gemara says, you could see the walls of the Beis Medrash sit at a slant. Chazar v'amar lahem, im halacha kimosi min Hashem yochichu. So Rabbi Eliezer finally says, if the halacha is like me, let the Ribono Shel Olam voice his opinion. Yata Sabaskal va'amra. We'll say, listen to this. Abaskal came out and said, Ma lochem eitzel Rabbi Eliezer. Why are you starting up with Rabbi Eliezer? Shalocha kimoso b'chol makom. We'll say, can you imagine a Baskal like this? Like the Baskal comes out and says, why are you starting Rabbi Eliezer? The halacha always follows Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Amar Rabbi Yeshua Ragla va'amar. Rabbi Yeshua, can you imagine? So Rabbi Yeshua stands up on his feet and he says, thank you, Ribono Shel Olam. Your opinion is noted. Va'amar lo b'shamayim. But you gave us the Torah. Right? The decisions about halacha are no longer made in the celestial sphere. They're no longer made by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My lo b'shamayim. What does it mean that Torah is not in the heavens? Am Rabbi Yirmiyah shekvar nitne Torah mehar Sinai. Ein onu mashgichin bebaskol. Shekvar kasabte bahar Sinai acharei rabim lachatos. So Yeshua, what does this mean? Says the Gemara. What it means is, Ribono Shel Olam, you gave us the Torah, and you gave us the mechanisms for deciding halacha. And the way we decide halacha, Rabbi is how achari rabim lahatos. We follow the majority of the Sanhedrin. The majority of the Sanhedrin held that this oven ultimately is tar. Rabbi Eliezer, we appreciate your opinion. We understand your opinion. You are in the minority. Stand down. Stand down. The halacha doesn't follow you. Ribono Shel Olam, we appreciate that you side with Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus, but you know what? The Ribono Shel Olam's vote in the decision of halacha counts as, not even as 1, counts as 0. It does not come into the conversation. So it says in Rabbi, just as a sidebar, Ashkechei Rabbi Nassan Lelio, Amalei Mai Avdech Lishbarach Hu Bahishaita. So Rabbi Nassan once was speaking with Eliyahu Hanavi. And it's Eliyahu, by the way, what was the Ribbon Shalom saying? In Shemai, can you imagine this? You're the Ribbon Shalom. You just voiced your opinion in the matter of halacha. And you were told by the Sanhedrin of saying, right? Thank you. Right? Thank you. Opinion noted. We'll take it under consideration. We appreciate your participation. Have a nice day. Right? So he asked, Elio, tell me, what was he thinking in that moment? Amar lekachayich. The Ribbon Shalom was smiling. Va'amar nitzchuni banai, nitzchuni banai. The Ribbon Shalom said, literally, my children have overcome me. In other words, the Ribbon Shalom was shepping nachas. Because you know what? What does the Ribbon Shalom want us to do more than anything? He wants us to own our spirituality. He wants us to own our Torah. He says, you know what? They're right. They're right. My children have surpassed me. My children have literally overcome or conquered me. My children are correct. It's their Torah. It's their halacha. It's their decision. And so, okay, I voiced my opinion, but I don't really have a vote. The vote ultimately is theirs. Incredible. So what happens? Now, you have to understand just the mechanics of what's unfolding over here. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus will not back down. We'll say he's wrong. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, maybe in the purest form of halacha, he may be right, but he's wrong. Because the halacha is decided by the majority. The majority of his rabbinic peers ruled against him, said, Tano Shalachnoi ultimately is Tameh. He should have yielded. He refuses to yield, and that was wrong. That was wrong. I will say we have concepts like this. Sometimes when you have like a rogue sage. A rogue sage is someone who refuses to defer to the majority. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus is wrong. He's wrong. Because the halacha is decided by the majority, yet he doesn't back down. So what do they do? We'll say that day, so remember, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus refuses to back down. That day, they took all of the items that he had declared ritually pure. Now, according to Rashi, it's possible that what it means is all the items that had come into an oven like this, that he declared as ritually pure, they brought it and they burned it. V'nimu alav uberchuhu. And they got together and B'churim is like to give him Mishaberach. What does that mean, Mishaberach? They excommunicated him. Right? They put him in Chayrim. V'amru. Mi yelech v'yodiu. So let's listen to this. Now the shaila was, who is going to tell Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus that he's been put in Chayrim? Because you understand, nobody wants to tell him why. Because obviously, this is a man of great spiritual prowess. How do we know that? He's got caribs to walk, right? Rivers reversing stream, walls falling down, bas calls coming out from Shamayim. So who exactly?
Is he the same Rebbe Eliezer that they retreated to a cave and looked at things? And
No. That's the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's Rabbi Eliezer Bar Ashbi. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. So who's going to tell him that he's in Chayrim? Amar Rabbi Akiva ani elech. Rabbi Akiva says, I will go. So Rabbi Akiva says, I'll go. Shema yelech adam sheino hagun v'yodio v'nimtza machriv es kol ha'olam kulo. We'll say what they are literally concerned is that Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus is obviously going to suffer great anguish as a result ultimately of this news, and they are concerned that his pain literally could destroy the world. So somebody has to go ahead and tell him what's going on without going ahead and allowing his pain to kind of create like a tidal wave of destruction among the world. So Rabbi Akiva says, I'll do it. What did Rabbi Akiva do? Rabbi Akiva dressed in black. He wrapped himself in a black cloak. So both say, Rabbi Akiva sat in black. Why? As a sign of mourning. He distanced himself from Dalet Amos because the halacha is you're not supposed to come into Dalet Amos of someone who is in Chayrim. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer Akiva, Maha Yomi Yomayim. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Akiva, tell me what's going on over here. Why are you dressed in black, and why are you not coming close to me? Amar lo Rebbe, Kimaduma li shechavirim b'dilim imcha. So Rabbi Akiva says, Rebbe, it appears to me that your friends have separated from you. So it's an incredible thing. Maybe it appears to me that your friends have separated from you. So what happened? Afu kara begadav. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus ripped his clothing. V'chalatz mina alav. He took off his shoes. It was like he's sitting shiva. V'nishmat v'yashav agabe karka. And he went ahead and he sat on the ground. Zolgu inov demos. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, his eyes filled with tears. We'll say, why did he filled with tears? Because again, he realized. I will say, now understand. We'll get into. I mean, we won't get into it now, but what happens at the end. Well, let's see. So his eyes filled with tears. But as a result of his pain, just his eyes running up with tears, a third of the world's olive, wheat, and barley crops were wiped out. Just so you understand, this is the pain of a tzaddik. This is why we're so careful with how we treat Talmidei Chachamim, because mistreatment of Talmidei Chachamim literally has negative repercussions on the world. Some say even literally the dough that a woman was holding in her hand went sour. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. Tana. Ach gadol haya be'osayom. Actually, they changed it to Af gadol. There was great wrath in the world that day. Shebechol makom shenasan ba'inav Rebbe Elazar nisraf. Any place where Rebbe Elazar looked was literally destroyed. Now, I was saying, now the Maharshal discusses whether this is literal or not. What it's talking about over here is that when the tzaddik is in pain, the world suffers as well. I will say, listen to this. Va'af Rabbi Gamliel. Now remember, Rabbi Gamliel is the Nasi. Right? Rabbi Gamliel is the head of the Sanhedrin. So Rabbi Gamliel, that day that Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus hears about the Cherem, where's Rabbi Gamliel? After Rabbi Gamliel, Hayababa Svina. Rabbi Gamliel is on a boat. Amad alav nachshal letavo. So as he's on a boat, there is a wave that is about to come and capsize the boat. Amar kimendumali she'ein ze'ela b'shal Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So Rabbi Gamliel sees almost like a Yonah-like episode unfolding over here. The boat's going to be capsized, and he realized that this was a result of the pain that his cherem caused Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Amad al-raglav Amar. Rabbi Gamliel gets up on the deck of the boat and he says, Bama shel olam, galui v'yadua lefanech shelo lichvodi asisi, v'lo lichvod beis abba asisi, el lichvodcha. Yibon shalom, you think I did this for my covet? You think I did this for my honor? You know why we excommunicated Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus? Lichvodcha, for your covet. Why Rabbi saying? Shelo yarbu machlokes v'Yisrael. Both you have to understand, this is an incredible yesod. You know, in Judaism, the beautiful part is we have room for multiple opinions. But at the end of the day, halacha decides what is right. Because I will say, at the end of the day, if we allow for each kol yasher ben av yasser, everyone to do whatever they want, or I found a rabbi that says this, or you could find a rabbi who says everything. And if you can't find a rabbi who says it, you could certainly Google it. And you'll find some shmendrik with a blog who says it, right? You can always find someone who says something. But at the end of the day, we all have to learn to bend our knee before halacha. Because if we don't all subscribe to the same Shulchan Aruch, then chas v'shalom, there won't be one Am Yisrael. There'll be this Am Yisrael, there'll be that Am Yisrael, there'll be that Am Yisrael. Gamliel says, you think I did this for me? You think I want to excommunicate a friend? You think I want to cause sar to Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus? But I as the Nasi, am obligated to look out for the klal. And the klal can't endure machlokes. So if Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is not going to yield to the majority, then I have to do what I have to do. What happened? Nachaya mizapo. The sea calmed down. The sea calmed down. So we'll say, listen to this. Now the story gets even more wild. Just a few more minutes, we'll say. Amos Shalom. The Vesud Rabbi Elazar Ach says, so get ready for this. This is wild. So Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus' wife, so we're coming back to the wives, her name was Ima Shalom. That was a beautiful name. Ima Shalom. Listen, now just to make it a little bit more interesting. So this is Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus' wife, who also happened to be the sister of Rabbi Gamliel. Okay, so you understand, Rabbi Gamliel is the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin. He's the one who's responsible for the excommunication, ultimately, of his brother-in-law, of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So what happens? So now, Ema Shalom realizes the power of her husband. So what does she do? So me'ahu ma'isa ve'elach lo have a shav kalei Rabbi Elazar le'meipa alape. But so get ready for this. From the day that he was excommunicated, Ema Shalom was, remember, as part of being excommunicated, you also can't come to shul, you also can't participate in the minyan. So therefore, what's happening? So Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is davening at home. From the day that he was excommunicated, Ema Shalom made sure that he would never say tachnun. He would never do Nefilas HaPayim. I will say, in Nefilas HaPayim, first of all, the Maharsha points out, you see from here the power of Tachnun. So Nefilas HaPayim is a supplicatory prayer that essentially says, emotional, I'm in pain, help heal my pain. She was nervous that if her husband, Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus, were to say Tachnun, the tefillah would be so intense that what happened? The pain would cause a loss to the life of her brother, Rabbi Gamliel, who was responsible for the cherem. So every single day she's watching her husband daven, and when she gets to Tachnun, she says, No tachanun for you. Right? See, we normally say, no tachanun. Yippee, right? Now, especially if it's like a Monday or Thursday, it's like, mamish. Right? So again, she's standing over him, no tachanun. So get ready for this. So we'll say there was one day where Ema Shalom got mixed up. She thought it was Rosh Chodesh. And therefore there was no tachanun. Or Bava. Or someone says that while he was davening, an ani knocked on the door, and Ima Shalom went to go give him some bread. What happened? The point is, she wasn't there when it was tachanun time. Ashkeche dinafa al apeh. She comes back into the room and she sees that what? He's laying tachanun. So Amrele, kum! Get up! Stop saying tachanun. Katilas la'achi. You're going to kill my brother Rabbi Gamliel. We'll say, adahachi nafak shipura mi beis Rabbi Gamliel b'shachiv. Sure enough, in that moment, the word came out, right? News came out from the house of Rabbi Gamliel that he had passed away. Plus, you just understand the power of tefillah. It's so many things. It's the power of tefillah, the power of pain. When you've wronged another, even if it's been justifiable, even if it's justifiable. So what happens? Amalei mina yadus. So Rabbi Elazar ben says, how did you know that my tachanun would chas v'shalom result in the death of Rabbi Gamliel? This is the tradition we have from our fathers. And we'll say, you understand, she is a sister of Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel is the Nasi. The Nasi was always a descendant of David HaMelech. So we have a tradition from our father's home. What's Rabbi say? And this goes back to Amud Aleph. Because David HaMelech was the Kol Hashar Ninalim Chutz Misha'arei Onah. And she said, the tradition I have from my father's home is that all the gates, since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, all the gates are closed, except for the gates of Onah, for the gates ultimately again of those who are wrong. Fine. 10 Rabbanan. Supposed to have the Gemara goes out. 10 Rabbanan. Let's just finish up to the Mishnah. We're almost done. Hama'anas hager over b'shlosh lavin. If you go ahead and you verbally wrong a convert, you violate 3 prohibitions. Va'lochtzo over b'shnayim. We'll say now, lochtzo literally means that you press him. Rashi says dochko. We're going to see what this usually means is in the context of finances. Either you lent him money and you pressure him to go ahead and pay you back, or he has some debt. So if you push him to pay back, you violate 2 lavin. So the Gemara says, Ma'ishna ma'ana t'chsivi shlosh lavin. So we'll say again, when it comes to verbally afflicting the ger, what are the 3 prohibitions? Ger lo sona, v'chi yogar itcha ger ba'atzchem lo sonu oso, and lo sonu ishes amiso, v'ger b'chlal amiso. So loch so not mishlosh. Shabbos says, I don't understand. By going ahead and pressing him, we also have 3 prohibitions. Ksivi lo salachatzenu, v'ger lo silchatz, v'lo siya lo kinoshe, v'ger b'chlalu. Ella echadzeh ve'echadzeh b'shlosh. Rather, you're right. Whether you go ahead and verbally wrong a ger, or you press him to pay back, that's either way you are in violation of 3 lavim. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer, V'nei mahez yer Torah b'lamid vav makomos, rather med ma makomos b'ger. But listen to this. Why is it? And this is an amazing Gemara. Why is it that the Torah warns us in 36 different places, and some say in 46 different places, about how to treat the convert? Mipnei shesuro ra. Rabbi say now shesuro ra means because his origins are bad. In other words, what does that mean? Rabbi say the ger often has additional battles that those who are born Jewish do not have, which makes a lot of sense. And I will say, one always has to stand in incredible awe of gerim, because what every single ger has to give up is unimaginable. Often they have to give up their family, and even if they're not going ahead, and even if they still have like a relationship with their biological parents, at the end of the day, familial relationships are different. Everything is different. So the Gemara says you have to understand the pekel in which the ger has to go through in life. You have to understand the challenges. And therefore you have to be especially careful with how you talk to him or her. That means Mesha Surah means that they have all of this negative baggage all of this difficult baggage to begin with. Therefore they have to be treated with kid gloves. But so what does it mean? That you shall not afflict the ger because you are strangers in Egypt. We'll say is an incredible yisod. A blemish that you have, don't point it out in your friend. We'll say you should know in general that Bali Musar point out that whenever you're able, the Baal Shem Tov also points this out, that whenever you're able to see a negative trait in someone else, chances are that what? It's a negative trait you have in yourself. It's just often easier to be able to see the negative traits in others than it is to be able to see the negative traits in yourself. But here Chazal are saying, if you have a negative trait, don't be quick to point that out in someone else. So the Gemara says, Mum shebechal tomer lechavercha, v'aynu da'amri inshi, but this is what people say, Dezakif lezekifa bidyukase, lo neima lechavre zakav binsei. That if you're talking to someone, and someone in their family has been hanged, right? Hanged, right? Not hung, hanged. Hanged. Right? If someone's been hanged, you should never tell them, oh, why don't you hang up the fish? So that's an expression we'll say. In other words, that if I know I'm talking to somebody and their family has been hanged, so I should be careful with my words. To even use the word hanged, but to use it in the context of fish, might evoke a pain in them. Therefore, again, the Gemara is just saying over here that we know what it feels like to be strangers. We know what it feels like to be alienated. We know what it feels like to be out of place. And therefore, we have to be especially careful with how we treat the ger, how we treat those who enter into our community, which is an incredible yesod. Just as an aside, I'll end with this. The Baal Shem Tov says, everyone is a ger in some way. Because everyone has something about themselves or about their lives that sets them apart by everyone else. And I know that there are times in life where I feel isolated. There are times in life where I feel alone. Maybe it's because of a family issue or a personal issue. And so the same way that I rely on people being sensitive to me, to recognize that every person feels out of place or feels alienated in one way or another. So the ger, the sensitivity to the ger, because he's most obvious as being someone who really needs additional love. But really from the ger we learn the need to always love each other. The need to always take care of one another. We need to always be sensitive. But at least, says the Chosh Baruch Hu, if I look out for the ger, I look out for those who join the fold, I need you to do the same. All right, we'll stop over here. Shkoyach. If I were to tell someone to listen to this year, Rabbisilber.com, and then go to Doc. Yep. Okay.